Hi, this is Jaya. In this video, we shall see about the union of England and Scotland. In the earlier days, England and Scotland had their own monarchs, that is, a king or a queen to rule them. But in 1603, James the Sixth of Scotland became the king of England and he was ruling both England and Scotland, and this is what we say Union of England and Scotland. And from the beginning, we find that there was a fight going on between them, and therefore an act of union was passed on 1st May 1707, and they made one common parliament where both the country people sat, and that place was Westminster. And Scotland was represented by 45 members in the House of Commons and 16 peers in the House of Lords. Earlier, the Scots had very little contact only with England, and the Presbyterian clergy and lawyers always went to the Dutch universities for their higher education, and very rarely only they came to Oxford or Cambridge. And even the Scottish overseas merchants had transactions with Holland and Scandinavia, but they never had any transactions with England or with any of the English colonies. At first, the union was popular neither in England nor in Scotland because they did not prosper much for them. But after 1707, this kept on going for nearly one generation, and that is the reason why the old pretender in 1715 and the young pretender in 1745 were able to get a large number of supporters, especially from the highlands of Scotland. And before the union, agriculture in Scotland was miserable, but after the union, they learnt a lot of agriculture methods from England, and even a few English ploughmen and farmers from South Britain, they went and worked for the Scottish landlords and taught them better methods of agriculture. And many agricultural experiments were conducted in Scotland, and because of this, we can say that by the time of the Napoleonic Wars, the situation in Scotland was that much better that it was teaching new things to England. And in the earlier years, low wages, poor living, and periodic famine was a sad lot of Scottish people. But by the 18th century, potatoes, vegetables, cheese, and occasionally meat also was added to the porridge and milk, which was till then the staple diet of the poor in Scotland. In Scottish housing, solid stone farms and cottages with one or two rooms with chimneys, glass windows, beds, furniture, and outside privies replaced the hovels and the peasants of Scotland, because earlier they were only living in the same place where their cattle also were kept. But now they built all these luxury places and they lived. And the main region of Scotland was Presbyterian religion, that is a church governed by elders and ministers, and these elders interfered in the everyday life of individuals, and they gave punishments for all the sins of immorality, and any adulterer or a fornicator, if they come and repent in the church, they were exposed on the stool to the merriment of all, particularly to the junior section of the congregation. And in order to avoid this intolerable humiliation, many poor girls often resorted to conceal their pregnancy, and sometimes it also went to child murder. And these elders now slowly became more tolerant, and that was because of the influence of English. And the rival religious group was the Episcopalians, and the gentry of the lowlands were divided more or less equally into Presbyterian and Episcopalian. But in the course of the century, Episcopalians dwindled and the Presbyterians became the acknowledged religion of Scotland. And though the Scottish cattle dealers sold their cattle in the face of North England, the business transaction between England and Scotland was very little, and London mailbag sometimes brought only one letter to Edinburgh. And not more than a dozen people from England visited Scotland in a year for pleasure. And the few English travelers also who went to Scotland always complained about the bad accommodation in the inns there. They were not attracted by the landscape because they did not find it beautiful enough, and the Englishmen never admired this wild moorland scenery, but the Scots loved their innermost hearts, with their innermost hearts, the scenery. And the southerners, despite the lowland scenery, as divided between melancholy waste and ill management fields of oats. And as to the highlands, they look horrid and frightful to the English eyes. But towards the end of the century, the landscape became so beautiful that it inspired many writers like Wordsworth, who wrote the famous poems like The Salted Reaper and To the Highland Girl. And in fact, many of literary men started visiting England, and all of them visited Scotland at least once. In 1773, Dr. Johnson, who was highly prejudiced against the Scots, undertook a long journey through the Scottish Highlands and Hebrides, accompanied by his admirer and biographer James Boswell. The Union of 1707 also enriched generous contributions of Scottish literary geniuses like Robert Burns, George Smollett, Sir Walter Scott, and Thomas Carlyle. And the greatest biography in English, The Life of Dr. Johnson, was written by James Boswell, who was a Scot. And David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, became famous not only in England but also in France with the publication of his book Political Discourses, first in English and afterwards in French. And his friend and countryman Adam Smith revolutionized the economic theories of the day when he brought out his masterpiece, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And the other intellectuals who won international fame were William Robertson, the historiographer, and Douglas Stewart, the famous professor of moral philosophy. Even the early part of the 17th centuries, the evils of feudalism survived in both lowlands and highlands. The union with England gave them an opportunity to become partakers in the overseas trade and also to immigrate to foreign countries like Canada. The Highlanders, with the inborn fighting spirit, by being absorbed into the British Army, were able to play responsible parts in British wars abroad. In the century preceding the Union, Scottish education was miserably poor. Both out of theft and out of patriotism, the idea of sending the Scottish gentleman's son to an English public school or university was unthinkable. At the same time, the educational institutions in Scotland did not maintain an encouraging academic atmosphere. Even Glasgow at the time of the Union was a market and university town with a small population of just 12,500. By the year 1800, the population rose to 80,000 with spectacular improvement in the living conditions. The university became famous also in Europe through Professor Adam Smith, the economist. Though Edinburgh ceased to be the capital of Scotland after the Union, it continued to be the legal, fashionable, intellectual center of the country. The city was famous throughout Europe for its philosophers, lawyers, and academicians. The Union opened a new avenue for the activities of the Scottish missionaries in many parts of the British Empire, including South India. It may be said that the latter part of the 18th century marked the golden age of Scotland. If you have anything more to add on to what I've said, please write it in the comment box, like the video, share it with your friends, and if you have not subscribed my channel, please subscribe and support. Thank you.